Do a roll call.
Certainly, and I'll start with, we have virtual, I can't see. Ms. Wells,
Here.
is JJ online? I don't see her.
I don't see her yet either. I'll introduce her when
Sure.
she comes online.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Rowena,
Here.
Ms. Tabachnik,
Here.
Mr. Chapin,
Here.
Mr. Mushak,
Here.
Ms. Lane Gallus.
Here.
And Mr. Schulman.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. The matter before us this evening is 2023-19R/M. Planning and Zoning Commission zoning text amendment for complete rewrite of the zoning regulations and map amendment for complete rezoning of the entire city. This is a continuation of the public hearing that we began last night. Let me explain how we conduct our public hearings. Mr. Kleppen will give a brief introduction to the matter at hand. We will then open it up to the public for public comment. This is not a conversation between the public and the commission members. The commission members will sit and politely, and I expect intently, listen to what you have to say. But we will not be commenting on what we hear this evening. We will give you as much time as you need to make your points, but ask as a courtesy to everyone that you keep them as short as possible while making certain that you cover all the issues that are of importance to you. I'll also just say, and this is personal, I can't speak for everyone on the commission, but for those presentations that tend to be especially long, it becomes frankly more difficult for us to concentrate. So again, excuse me, if you can be as brief as possible while covering all your points, we would appreciate that. And I think we can then do a better job of hearing what you have to say. And I think that's important to you, and frankly, it's important to us as well. We ask that you introduce yourself with your name and your address, and that you simply keep your language appropriate to a public meeting. And once we have closed the hearing, we are scheduled to meet again next week to discuss and, if possible, to reach a resolution on this matter. There are a couple of things I need to say. One is we'll go back and forth between those people who are online and those people who are here live. We do have available Spanish translation for anyone who wants that. And I'm going to ask our translator to say that in Spanish for anyone who's listening.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Carmen y si alguno necesita traducción en esta noche, yo estoy aquí para eso. Gracias.
Gracias. I've exhausted my Spanish. In accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, the proposed zoning regulations and zoning map was referred to the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, known as DEEP, the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission, the 5 Mile River Commission, the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, known as WestCog, our neighboring municipalities, Westport, Wilton, New Canaan, and Darien, the Connecticut Department of Health, the Norwalk First Taxing District Water Department, and South Norwalk Electric and Water. We're acknowledging that the commission has only received comments from WestCog and the town of Westport, in addition to the comments which we read into the record last night from DEEP. We were statutorily required to read those comments into the record at the beginning of last night's public hearing. With that, unless I've missed something, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kleppen.
Sure, and I'm not going to repeat anything I said last night. As the chairman mentioned, we do have Spanish translation services available. We'll rotate between in-person and online speakers. If you are attending virtually, you can, I do see somebody with the phone number, so you hit the *9 button to raise your hand, or otherwise, if you are just participating normally through Zoom, use the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. For speakers speaking here, we were advised that perhaps maybe be about a foot away from the microphone, try to speak clearly and slowly so it's audible. The actual recording of the meeting was fine, but somebody said it was muffled when they were listening to it. I couldn't tell from our vantage point. So I'd say maybe be about a foot away, and then slowly, loudly, and clearly, I think will help. So with that, first speaker is.
Sorry, Steve, before you begin, I've just been reminded, there was one thing I did forget to say. We only, because we don't have any time limits on how long you can speak, we only allow speakers to speak once. As I look out into the audience, I think maybe with one or two exceptions, none of you were here last night. But if you have already spoken last night, we will not permit you to speak again this evening. The only exception to that would be an attorney who was representing a different property owner this evening than they were representing last night. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Sure. First speaker, Matt Ineglia. Is that? Sorry if I didn't have that right.
You can listen.
You might, yeah, it does rotate.
Thanks. So my name is Matt O'Nelia. I represent ONG Industries, properties on Smith Street. There's a handful of them, but the primary addresses are, call it 20 and 34 and 48. I'm here tonight, not only representing ourselves, but I think I speak for a lot of the other heavy industrial users in the city that are going to be affected by the proposed regulations. There's no really other way of saying it other than we strenuously object to the reclassification of our properties to the CD4W, or the proposed CD4W. We're a heavy industrial user in the city of Norwalk. We've been here for 40 plus years. We've been in the state of Connecticut now for 100 years as a family-owned fourth generation business, which I am a part of that fourth generation. The proposed rezoning essentially takes away pretty much everything that we do in our business on a daily basis going forward. And it erodes and essentially completely strips away our ability to enhance our business for the future. So yeah, I can get into some of that in a little bit. One of the things that is what the POCD talks a lot about is sustainability. When you look at some of the things that we provide, it's not necessarily retail. We provide construction materials and services to the community. Divine Brothers across the river does as well. You oftentimes see our barges, for example, on the river with, construction aggregate. One of those barges represents 50 trucks that are no longer needed on I-95 or Route 1 or within the community. And that's 50 truckloads of material. So that's 50 trucks in to bring material in and 50 trucks out. So it's really 100 trucks that you're talking about for one barge. So when you start to add, what that looks like across a year, and the services that are provided, it's substantial. So removing that from the community would, you might not see the ancillary effect until further down the road. A better example of that is Save-A-Tree. They're a tenant on our property. They've been there for 23 of the 40 years that we've been there. They provide they provide services to the residents, businesses, and community here in Norwalk. Again, they're a heavy truck operator. What the proposed regulations does is it takes that business out of the city of Norwalk and into another community. So you're taking, again, those trucks, those employees, that tax base out of the city, most likely given the industrial constraint of supply in the area, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. So where are they going to go and how are they going to get back here? This has really been an issue that we've seen not just in Norwalk, but everywhere else where industrial users are sort of getting squeezed from their sort of places of operation. And in theory, it looks good on paper and it looks good, maybe it looks good visibly. But what it does is it's adding costs, and it's having the opposite effect of the sort of eco-sustainability that is the buzzword of the day. The further we are away from our end users, the more we're putting on the roads, the more congestion, the more traffic, the more CO2, et cetera. The cost goes up. It's expensive to operate. If the further away, that cost has to get passed on to the consumer, which is the community. So what we're hopeful of and hopeful for is that the commission will maybe take some time to relook at the proposed regulations, and rather than squeeze what has been sort of a historically beneficial use to the city for not only ourselves, but I think I again speak for a lot of the heavy industrial users or even light industrial users in the city, is to look to change or modify the language to provide documentation that would allow, continued industrial use with the expectation that, waterborne transportation remains a right as of right. Furthermore, some clarification around, as Attorney Suchi put it last night, I listened in to the conversation last night, the rewording or clarification of what would be pre-existing non-conforming uses that come out of this, and maybe an expansion of that to include the possibility of industrial users having the ability to modify or enhance or change their uses within their property going forward. The way I read the regulations now is that we wouldn't be able to necessarily put an addition on our building in Norwalk, for where Save-A-Tree is, just to use an example, and I'll touch upon that in a second. Without, we would the way the regs are written, it doesn't look like we would be able to do that, period. Not even through a special use permit or anything like that. We would just not be allowed to do that. 2 years ago, we spent a considerable sum of money to renovate that building and to sort of bring it into the 21st century for Save-A-Tree. With that, we went through the lighting efficiencies with Eversource, windows, overhead doors, HVAC units from an air quality standpoint. We also spent the majority of the money that was spent was actually for flood proofing, which I know was a big topic of conversation last night. If Save-A-Tree, who has been, we are the taxpayer, but an employer of Norwalk residents, has the opportunity to expand their business, they're not allowed to do that. So again, where are they going to go and what are they going to do? You know, it was, and I'm rambling and I promise I'll be done in a minute, but 2+ years ago, I was invited by the commission or folks on the commission to meet with the consultants that you guys utilize to help work through this process. And I know it's not an easy process, and I don't envy the task. We met with myself and King Industries and Divine and some of the other users, and not one recommendation. We had a good conversation. There was nothing, controversial or, antagonizing. We had a very good conversation. Not one thing that we talked about made it into the POCD. And, for a consultant from Boston who has no ties to Connecticut, no ties to the community, to be telling us what the quote unquote highest and best use is for our property is a little insulting, given that we've been here for 40 years and, we should be, it's in the eye of the beholder as to what the highest and best use is. So, with that, I'm done. I appreciate your time tonight and I appreciate all the hard work, but, we're not asking for, just an unwilling or, an inability to do whatever we want. We think there needs to be a balance, and we're happy to work with the staff on that to preserve sort of our business and what we do on a day-to-day basis, as well as the other heavy industrial users. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lisa Britton.
Good evening, guys. Lisa Britton, 19 Shorefront Park. I want to start by thanking you, Steve, and your staff and this commission for listening to the concerns of residents this summer, particularly as it applied to upzoning single-family neighborhoods, as well as deferring the development on Water Street until such time as we deal with the centuries-old flooding problem. I planned to speak last night, but had another commitment. But I listened to the comments of the speakers today, and I honestly thought these two wrap-up hearings would be lower in attendance. And I was intrigued by the myriad of new speakers, including Merit 7, the Weber Country Club, and Argent, the new owners of Manresa. Not to mention a new group of residents that we're just now hearing about all the zoning changes. Many of last night's comments were directed at the disconnect and the hardship to homeowners between Norwalk's definition of substantial housing improvement in flood zones and the 25% formula versus FEMA's or our neighboring towns of 50%. Given that the city was ready to upzone Water Street, it did seem to be a bit of a disconnect. It also made me think about how comprehensive this rewrite has been, changing almost every aspect of the city and how it's evolved since zoning regulations were first written 50 or 75 years ago, and how the public has been expected to digest and comment on all the changes in a matter of months and a few public hearings. It's been overwhelming. The drivers of this rewrite, the simplification, which I agree with, the density and affordable housing, has often pitted younger versus older generations and renters versus homeowners against one another. And that's really kind of unfortunate, because I myself downsized 3 years ago due to a combination of factors. Change in my living circumstances, I became an empty nester, and combined with my ever increasing property taxes and affordability issues. And so I downsized into a more densely populated neighborhood, and I love it. However, when I kind of hear, and I don't want to be insulting, but when I hear some of the I call them kids because they're younger than we are, in their 20s, arguing that they can't afford to buy a house yet, I can't help but remember I couldn't afford to buy a house till I was 33 years old. Anyway, no. Having said that, there is a housing shortage in this country, with almost doubling the population than when I was born. I'm 64 years old. And I think we all understand that more people equates to the need for more housing. But we must also accept that for the foreseeable future, it does mean more cars, more waste, more blight, and more strain on city resources. And that's why I've always argued from the beginning that we can't responsibly take on increased density without also addressing the need for better management. I sometimes think it's disingenuous to the city to make all these changes and then either ignore, defer, or deflect enforcement or management of the very real consequences of more people. And when, like I said, I've also argued, when did it become Norwalk's responsibility, the second most densely populated municipality behind Bridgeport, with already 14% affordable housing, to solve Fairfield County's housing issues when our neighboring towns refuse to do so. We got to improve the management of the city if we're going to add more people. No doubt best practices and benchmarking practices exist in other cities that we aspire to be. I'm most familiar with increased development in Salt Lake City, Utah, where we still maintain a family home, and Scottsdale, Arizona, where my mother lives. Both of those cities are roughly double the size of the population of Norwalk. They actively manage enforcement and ordinance violations much more than Norwalk, and they're cleaner. And they also have more diverse housing than we do. One of the biggest reasons for pushback on the single-family neighborhood upzoning was because most witnessed the lack of enforcement and deterioration of a neighborhood once a single-family house turned into a two-family rental, followed by the proliferation of more units, often unsafe, unkempt, and untaxed. In other words, illegal. And this summer, Mr. Mushak, you spoke very eloquently about how absentee landlords can and blight can destabilize a neighborhood. If the objective is to double the size of our city, then we need to double, triple, or quadruple our zoning enforcement and review or rewrite our zoning citation and management processes, just as you're doing the zoning code. It was great to hear the mayor announce additional enforcement personnel to support Mr. Hayducky, but it was vague. Violations and blight invariably increase as the city's population grows. Norwalk hasn't approached enforcement with the same vigor it's approached this zoning rewrite, or say parking tickets on Washington or Wall Street, or putting a resident's house into a city tax sale for their unpaid property taxes. It's imperative that this commission address the consequences of density as much as it aspires to increase it. Please don't rush your vote on the most comprehensive and consequential change to this city in over 70 years without better understanding all the consequences to all the different businesses and residents of the city. And for that, I thank you for your time and all the effort that you've put in this year on this zoning rewrite. Thanks.
Thank you.
Again, just a reminder, if anybody's attending virtually, *9 if you're dialing in by phone, or raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen. With that, next speaker, Donna Smirniotopoulos.
Good evening. What is the optimal distance from the microphone? This is okay? You can hear me. I do want to thank everyone for being here, all the members of the commission. I appreciate the yeoman's work that you do. There's an old joke about a grandmother at the beach with her grandson, and a wave comes and sweeps him away, and she begs God to bring him back to her, and then the next wave spits him out, and she says he was wearing a hat. So I fear that sometimes we come off like that. We do appreciate everything you're doing. This is a mammoth task. I cannot possibly begin to understand all of the minutiae of the changes that you are considering, but it is a lot. And I agree with my friend and neighbor Lisa that maybe it's too much for one run, and it might be worthwhile considering following the lead of the Charter Revision Commission, which did a preliminary, and then they're like, you know, we need to come back and revisit this because it is so comprehensive. I think it's difficult for the public, especially difficult for you to wade through it all. I do appreciate that you scaled back upzoning in residential neighborhoods. You know, the single family neighborhoods. We were feeling the pressure, I think, because of quality of life issues. You know, it is difficult to get around. People have more cars now than they had when these regulations were written. So that some of that is a problem of our own creation. I understand and appreciate that the desire was to update the code. It does need to be updated and to simplify it. I don't believe, based on what I've read, that the code has been simplified. I know that there are fewer housing zones than there were before, but it seems like things were added. And I know some people spoke last night about areas of the sustainability portion of it regarding substantial improvement. When I purchased my home in 2012, the home was in need of repair. And I learned very quickly that I had, in order to do what I wanted to do to the home, I was going to be forced into FEMA flood mitigation, which was not a full lift, but I had to fill the basement. I had to put in helical piles. I spent about $100,000 on things that no one can see. And this was because I surpassed the 50% mark. So now fast forward 13 years, I can't imagine someone, a first-time buyer, and we're talking about affordability, looking at neighborhoods near me like Norr and Mack Streets or Harbor Shores, where a first-time buyer might be looking in South Norwalk, and they will be kept away from those homes if that threshold is lower to 25%, because they're not going to be able to do very much. And I think it's a shame to cut those people out of the market. The other thing that struck me under sustainability, and I'm going to have to scroll to my phone here, but it is under vegetation, landscape, and drainage preservation. I'm concerned about this because there's a part of me that really believes in property rights. And if I want to cut a tree down, I shouldn't have to ask permission to do it. Even if it's a perfectly healthy tree, it's on my property, I own it. So I feel that there are too many rules. It's way more complicated than it needs to be. My yoga instructor always told me, try to do less. And I think that that's a valuable lesson for looking at these changes. You want it to be comprehensive, but I don't see where the simplification is coming in. It does not seem simple to me. My taxes are probably going to be double this year once I get my bill in January from when I bought the house. I did improve the house, but I didn't improve it that much for the taxes to double. And the reward for doubling my taxes is I have to ask permission of City Hall to do anything on my property. There's almost nothing I can do without having to pull a permit. I'm not sure why that is. I think people should be able to, besides, hang paintings and paint the walls, we should be able to do things without having to pull a permit. So I was hoping that the collective wisdom of this body and the staff at Planning and Zoning, that you could figure out a way to make this simpler with fewer rules. The sustainability, it's a great word. Everybody loves the word sustainability right now, but I have problems with some of the regulations regarding grading and especially tree removal. I saw someone out counting trees on private property months ago, and that really concerned me. I don't think it's anybody's business whether I have a tree or I don't have a tree. Anyway, thank you very much for your service, and I appreciate you coming out 2 nights in a row.
Thank you.
Next speaker is, we have a couple of virtual hand raises. MBS iPhone, just please unmute, give your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is actually Robert Artell. My name is Robert Artell, and I live at 42 Harborview Avenue in South Norwalk. Does everybody hear that?
Can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
No,
Go
I
ahead,
can
yes.
hear you.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to me. And I would just like to address the issues of substantial improvement. It really is a tremendous hardship for people, especially homeowners who already own homes in the flood zone, to do any kind of improvement when it's only going to be 25% of an appraised value that's 10 years ago. Think about putting on a roof, think about putting on new windows. All of those things are fairly expensive. Those houses would have a very low value. And now we're talking not about new buyers, but people who have lived there for a long time and really want to stay in their neighborhoods. I think that those are extremely restrictive. And the other thing to address is, getting variances when you live on a substandard size lot is very difficult. And we, in our home, actually applied for variances in 1996 to knock down our house and replace it with a new house, but we never got a chance to build it. So we went before the variance appeals again after we had gotten, by the way, the variances, and they denied us in 2006, which led us to, involve lawyers at extreme cost to get the variances so we could actually build our new house. On top of that, we asked zoning what we could do to get our houses high as possible, and no one ever told us we could put it up on pilings. What they told us is we were allowed a 3-foot crawl space. So we raised our yard as much as we could grade wise, and we raised our house as much as we could, but we would have actually had the house fuller up. So this is an issue with the zoning department, and these are problems that develop for people who are trying to do the right thing. But let me go back to the substantial improvement. That's really the biggest issue right now. It really is not fair. You should base it on present day market value, like other communities do. You should make it 50% as a cap, and you should look at a 3 to 5 year look back period. I think that would be much fairer to everyone. It's based on FEMA regulations. It's based on surrounding communities' choices. And I just think it's a better idea. Remember, there are a lot of older citizens in Norwalk who want to improve their homes or at least keep them in a situation that would make them better with new roofs, better windows, which is more energy efficient. And that will become very difficult with this present regulation. And that's all I really have to say. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is Beverly Krieger.
Hi, good evening. First of all, I want to thank you all for your service and for your time and for your attention. I know this can be a thankless job sometimes, but we do appreciate it. I wanted to speak about what I understand to be a request by Argent to do a Manresa Island Manresa Island overlay zone that would be attached to the new changes to the zoning regulations. I live in South Norwalk. I've always lived in South Norwalk. I live in Harbor Shores. I just had a chance to review this during the past couple of days, and some of the inclusions strike me as frankly outrageous and provisions that would negatively and severely impact the quality of life in the neighborhoods that abut it and are close to it, like Harbor Shores, Village Creek, Rowayton, East Norwalk, even going to some of the areas farther up north, just above us. We have very limited access now. We have Woodward Avenue. It's a 2-lane, not very large highway that goes back and forth. We, and many of our neighbors I can speak for, especially love our neighborhood because of the quality of life there. It's a reasonably quiet area. It's quite lovely in its peace. The waterfront, the undisturbed waterfowl, the kinds of things that they are including in this overlay proposal strike me as not only ambitious, but outrageous. They're asking to, and I'm just going to cite some of the highlights. I mean, there's a lot to it. I don't want to spend too much of your time this evening going over this. They're saying an accessory use that would be permitted would be an amphitheater. Really? A boathouse? Well, that depends on the size, but there are no limits in here to what could be built. They want to include an event space. No limitations cited in this to what that would include. Live music. We already hear a lot of music there from various places around on the waterfront, but a live music venue in a residential area, the upzoning just boggles my mind from supposedly was supposed to be a single family home residential area. It changes the whole character and puts a tremendous burden on the roads and on everybody who live in the neighborhoods that both abut and are within hearing distance of that area. They want to put in a marina without limitation. Right, there are piers there now, and maybe a small marina is appropriate for the use of the people who live there. But to put in a commercial marina, which is really what this is that they have in here, there are no limitations put on these things. They want to put in piers, no limits on that. They want to allow recreational boating or fishing facilities. Well, what exactly are they referring to with that? No definitions. It can be very broad. A sports field, is this going to be commercial? And a waterfront club. All of that they're layering on to what is supposed to be a single family home residential area, to the extent that I understand how it is zoned. And to my mind, this is extremely outrageous. When they talk about the density issues, they do it in a very technical and oblique way, so it's difficult to really compute what they're proposing, but they do want to be able to put in what is essentially limited multifamily housing. They claim to preserve open space. Well, how's that open space going to be used? Is it the commercial sports fields that they're going to have? There are just no limitations put on in this. As you all know, I'm sure have heard ad infinitum about it. We have a major a major water drainage problem in our area. Not only do we have insufficient drainage to drain when there's a storm, But in my street, the water actually comes up from other areas because it can't drain fast enough. When you're talking about this kind of density of building, sports arenas, what they're proposing to be allowed to do in this overlay, I can't imagine how much more water will have to be drained and how much less land there will be to absorb it, to slow the drainage. All around, I see this as negatively impacting tremendously our quality of life and those of our neighbors and those of us who live throughout South Norwalk. So I want to thank you all very much for your attention, and please give this careful consideration and don't give them this kind of carte blanche that they seem to be requesting. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Diane Cece.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Chairman, I just want to state up front that I have a fairly lengthy comment, unfortunately, or statement, I should say. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get this typed up yesterday or today and over to you. I am more than happy to defer to, if you have someone there in the audience who has a time constraint, I'm more than happy to defer to someone there who may need to leave, and I can pop on shortly.
I think you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kleppen. First of all, before I begin, this is Diane Cece, East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. I personally live on Olmsted Place. Before I begin my comments, I just want to make two general comments. I know this is not a dialogue, but I want to get an understanding of whether or not you were able to actually keep this public hearing open for additional comments coming into the commission. And if so, when you can do that. I also want to clarify something that I think may be some confusion that perhaps you can answer, even though it's not a dialogue. It's my understanding that because this application before you for the zoning regulation amendment is generated by the city, by staff itself, and not by any property owner or a private stakeholder, that the state statutes that require a time clock on your review and your decision-making does not apply to this. And so if that is the case, then I would, and if it does apply to you, I would like to understand why, but if it's not the case, I would also like to ask that, as in the past, you keep public comment open for a period of time so people can review these videos, they can do more research on their own, and they can submit additional information to you. The second thing I want to say is that ENNA did not specifically take up the topic of substantial improvements in terms of the FEMA flood zone maps and the calculations you're proposing. Number one, actually, it was brought to our attention. I hadn't realized that those changes that are substantial are actually in this rewrite, and I'm just learning about it myself. However, I feel confident as a long-term member and leader of ENNA, much like the folks at Marvin Beach Association, that I am confident in speaking on behalf of all the residents in East Norwalk that live in these zones, that they would be share the same concerns as all the folks that you've heard of. And I hope that you revisit this so not to impose undue hardship on folks. Okay, so as ENNA, first, of course, we want to applaud the efforts of the consultants and staff to do a general cleanup of the regulations, including providing the missing definitions and clarity of terms, and of course, the reduction in the overall number of zones. It was our initial understanding that this project would be largely focused around that, and to make it easier for us mere mortals to read and understand the zoning codes. While the draft regulations achieve much of that, it also overwhelmingly meets another apparent goal, one that's actually been stated by staff and commissioners, and that is to make it easier for developers to develop what they want, where they want it, when they want it, and now to actually do it with reduced public notification and input. A case in point is the ability to build higher, more dense buildings as of right, with no public notice and no public hearings. It should surprise no one that ENNA believes that this draft is not quite ready for prime time, and that the public scrutiny and your own review and deliberation should continue despite what we think may be an arbitrary goal of a year-end deadline for your decision. It would be helpful to us and probably to each of the commissioners for staff to provide a layman's explanation of the process to modifying any portion of this plan. And if it's as difficult as bringing in consultants, lengthy legal reviews, let's please be careful not to ring a dangerous bell that can't easily or ever be unrung. As to the specifics that are in addition to the ENNA email sent to you last month and the many emails we've sent to staff, we'd like to point out the following regarding the proposed plan. As to enforcement, ENNA encourages a separate and comprehensive review of current zoning enforcement powers, and where modifications to state statutes would support the best interests of Norwalk property owners, we would want our elected and appointed officials to lobby on our behalf to strengthen both the enforcement timelines and the fines. As in other parts of the city, East Norwalkers are keenly aware of weak enforcement. And while ENNA wholeheartedly supports the legal rights of property owners, we do not want to continue to see the trend of deliberate noncompliance by property owners who subscribe to a mentality of, quote, it's easier to seek forgiveness and variances than it is to get permission, end quote. And we realize these are a few bad apples, but it impacts almost all of our neighborhoods at this point. In regards to public notification and engagement, while we applaud the minor changes to the public notifications that will now require placards at parcels for special permit hearings, ENNA still implores you to consider the more robust and reasonable public outreach recommendations that were submitted to P&Z in 2016 through the neighborhood coalition group, the Coalition of Norwalk Neighborhood Associations, and that we and other neighborhood associations continue to desire. In addition to a matrix of public outreach tools that are required based on the type, size, and location of a development application, that document contains some best practices from various size communities across the country. Most of them recognize that public notification that happens only at the time of a public hearing is essentially too little, too late. A community that truly embraces public outreach and engagement and sincerely wants feedback have required, and in some cases even codified, a provision for early notification once an application is filed and prior to the initial commission review. In many of the cases, the municipalities require a developer to actually not only meet with neighbors prior to their filing of the application, they are required to provide the meeting space and appropriate materials for their review. On this same topic, and for roughly the past several years, ENNA has tried to work collaboratively with zoning staff and the mayor's office to implement a robust opt-in software communications program where residents and stakeholder groups can use an interactive map to identify parcels and neighborhood boundaries where they would want to be notified of land use changes and applications. The city of New Orleans uses this software with great success, and I personally subscribe to their software to stay abreast of the types of communications that they make available to their residents there. I urge each of the commissioners to take a look at their online site called Notice Me, and you can find that by visiting noticeme.nola.gov. Finally, under the public engagement portion, as it pertains to the regulations, our residents have become weary of hearing that it causes a financial hardship for large developers to provide us residents with the types of documents, images, and renderings of proposed developments that would allow us to better visually understand the real physical impact of building heights, depths, setbacks, open areas, landscape and hardscape, shadow impacts, and the blockage of views. In this day and age of advanced computer-aided design, 3D imaging and simulation, artificial intelligence, Dropbox file storage, and other tools, There is no valid reason for P and Z not to request as many visual tools as possible. And in fact, not only would it possibly allay many premature fears of development, but we see it as a very valuable tool for commissioners and other city agencies to use as you conduct your own reviews. We also feel strongly that while P and Z department itself is often exempt from having to comply with public outreach and notification, we feel it would show great goodwill toward and respect of residents for staff to voluntarily provide all the same notifications, if not more. And in the case of land use applications that originate with P and Z staff rather than the landowners, we also feel that the commission can ignore the otherwise required statutory timeline requirements that must be afforded a private property owner. Now on to the rezoning itself. Here are some of the highlights of our primary concerns, none of which should be anything you are hearing for the first time. And in fact, a number of you have heard for more than the number of years we care to count at this point. Under the rezoning, we're especially concerned with any areas where more allowed uses and are currently permitted, where there will be more allowed uses and are currently permitted, but especially upzoning to include increased commercial development and large multifamily developments as defined in the plan, and areas where water designated uses for new uses are such as hotels. I believe you know the zones in East Norwalk where that would pertain. And two, we request that you ask staff to provide you with a clear and concise listing for every area in the city that provides every instance of where a proposed use was not allowed before and is being allowed under the new plan, and also to reconsider the justification for each of those. We ask that you take another close look at the entire use table and see if you agree with us that some uses simply cannot or should not be justified for new permits anywhere in the city. Case in point, adult use establishments and petroleum processing plants. Another major concern are the areas where staff has shifted numerous uses from special permit requirement to as of right, or simple site plan review. Again, we urge you to ask staff to provide you with a clear and easy to understand listing of wherever this is happening in the city and for which uses. A case in point for East Norwalk was the quote, under the radar change in the EVTZ corridor of East Avenue that required a special permit for increased building height to 3.5 stories. But now under this proposal, that height would be approved as of right, regardless of whether no density was being sought. This makes zero sense, but leaves us vulnerable for an over-the-counter as of right approval for taller buildings, and then the developer coming in for a special exception to seek more units. By the way, if you look at the code carefully, you'll see a term that we haven't seen before called special exceptions. And that leaves us very concerned because when you go to the definitions, it just refers you to another table. And it appears to be a tool that would be a subjective tool for staff to use to put in changes that aren't covered under any other applicable definition today. And it would be without proper public review. Another unclear term that concerns us throughout the document, in the category is something called, within the category, water dependent uses. It has a vague catch-all category basically called any other use that doesn't fit in with the defined uses. We feel this will allow for subjective review and decision, and again, most likely be without public review or hearing. Ideally, we would want the other water dependent uses not defined here to be taken out, of course. As to the proposed upzoning, the Selden area streets that were highlighted on the East Norwalk map as still being included for some minor upzoning appears to really have little, if any, benefit for upzoning on those streets. And especially since multiple neighbors have expressed concerns to you about congestion and quality of life due to the width of the streets and current parking issues. So we ask you to reconsider staff recommendation on that upzoning. Importantly, two that we implore you to send back to the drawing board. One is Cottage Street, especially Cottage Street where it meets at East Avenue. If the rationale, first of all, we don't understand the rationale at all for upzoning Cottage Street. If you've driven down the street, I think you'll see for yourself that it doesn't make any sense. The TOD rationale that staff provided for you is actually inappropriate, given the density, parcel sizes, and the proximity to the already 77 unit at Mill Pond development, which ends up being nearly across the street from Cottage Street where it meets East Avenue. Since residents can only assume that there is no pending application in the wings and that staff is not holding private discussions with developers who are trying to influence a change rate there, ENNA strongly urges the commission to reject the Cottage Street upzoning and to not consider any future change unless and until a proposed development is available for public consideration. And secondly, the split uses and upzoning, commercial upzoning, full consideration of Cottage Street only if and when staff provides you with what may be an imminent application. The reason why I say that is not to be disrespectful in any way. The reason why I say it is that we just can't make heads or tails about why there is a push to upzone that area with a particular focus on the part of Cottage Street that comes out to East Avenue Extension. It's already congested. It makes no sense. And in terms of it being close to the train station, there are other parcels that are close as well and wouldn't have as major an impact and are already being developed. Secondly, for the proposed upzoning, the split uses and upzoning and commercial upzoning on fully half of Seaview Avenue. We don't understand why this is being done in the area that's mainly across from Veterans Memorial Park and in a new zone that would allow for large multifamily development, and you may want to reread that definition yourselves, and hotels, among other large commercial developments. My last segment is regarding the East Avenue Village Transit Zone, which, as you know, is south of I-95. Repeated public requests to scale back the height, density, and geographical area have been ignored, and in several cases have been increased despite public objection. When EVTZ was zoned, when EVTZ was approved, residents were given a false assurance that their concerns could always be revisited in the future. Well, what better time to revisit their concerns when the entire zoning regulation is under consideration? Of most urgency tonight is for you to know that residents do not want 3.5 stories to be changed from special permits with hearings to as of right applications with no public notification. In fact, in selling the EVTZ plan to the Council Planning Committee, to the Land Use Commissions and you, and especially to the public, staff repeatedly assured those who were leery of such dramatic growth potential of two things. One, that none of the applications that could impact height and density would be considered without a public hearing. And two, a thorough review of the 13 quality of life impact considerations, which are both required under the special permit, not to mention abutting neighborhood notifications. If you allow staff to change this corridor to be 3.5 stories as of right, the public loses the ability for the special permit review and the public hearing. ENNA has found no logical reason to allow 3.5 stories as of right, and staff's explanation fell short of rationalizing the need. Again, we hope commissioners agree with residents that the onus of demonstrating needs and benefits of a new use or regulation falls to staff and does not fall to residents to demonstrate why they don't want it. Though Mr. Kleppen was asked by former Mayor Knopp and other residents at a recent ENNA meeting, it seems as if he was not even very clear on why this height recommendation is being made. It honestly makes no sense. To the East Avenue Village District overlay, as you and staff saw from the November ENNA email requesting a number of modifications, especially the EVTZ bonus point change, we noticed in the latest plan version outline that many of our requests that we thought were accepted still have not been changed in the documents. And and that was as of either yesterday or this morning. We ask tonight that the staff and commission review the chart not only for accuracy prior to any adoption, but also please to do another sanity check and see if the value of the menu of the amenities is truly commensurate with the potential of overdevelopment in this neighborhood. One example of something residents are strongly opposed to that we believe had already been changed is under the open space regulation. It reads, the public open space shall include landscaped areas, pedestrian plazas, courtyards, walkways, recreation areas, and the like. It also still says, such open space shall be permitted on the roof of a structure. Now, we had asked long ago for that to be removed. I believe the commissioners had asked for it to be removed. And I was under the impression that staff had agreed that open space on a rooftop should not be considered as open space as part of the requirement for the development. Under amenity calculations, we're grateful that some of you on the commission have agreed with residents that the points and threshold to achieve maximum density and height is simply too low. And that in addition to modifying the point system itself, which we believe still needs a lot of work, we agree that by simply compiling 15 or 20 points is way too low and will never provide the public benefits you intended that would compensate for density. The applicant must achieve the points required below for the following bonuses. I'm sorry, this would be in the type copy. So just that you remember that it's 15 points to reduce the dwelling units down to 1 per 1250. And they only need to get 20 of those points to reduce the density down to 1 unit per every 825 square feet. The final point on East Avenue is in order to review and fix some of the major concerns with the EVTZ zone, we want you to reconsider at least this residents' request to reduce the peripheral parcels that encroach from East Avenue onto the side streets. Again, this is a request we made during that process in your review, and we believe this is a good time for you now to reconsider this on our behalf. We want to take this golden opportunity to limit EVTZ standards to either only East Avenue proper or to encroach no more than 1 block in on the peripheral streets such as Fitch Street, Fort Point, Winfield, Rowan, and Van Zandt. The map as it exists today is overreaching into the number of parcels that can have maximum density and height and abuts onto the residential parcels there. Residents want to reduce the peripheral parcels that encroach from East Avenue for more than 1 block in. In closing, due to volunteer manpower and budget concerns, we've not been able to do a page-by-page review, especially to the level of detail that you received from some of the major land use attorneys. We fear that lurking within the over 400 pages and detailed specifications could be something that we've overlooked and may not realize until an application comes forward. Perhaps even the application that prompted the detailed specification to begin with. It will be sad for us if down the road we're told that something of a major concern to us is to be dismissed because it's perfectly legal in the new regulations. We saw this in both the POCD, the TOD, and the EVTZ reviews. We ask that you, as the city's appointed commission reviewing and presumably adopting this plan, to please instruct staff to provide you not only with the excellent spreadsheet of modifications they made to this version, but to please provide you with a list of every change that was made from the original regs, and to include a column of where the request for the change originated, whether it is linked to an imminent application, and the specific benefit of the change. This document would be helpful to you as you prepare your final deliberations, but may also give the public a last breath opportunity to bring any glaring concerns to your attention that perhaps we've all missed. We want to thank you, to the consultants, the staff, and commission for your work on this to date. I want to leave you with 2 quotes to consider. I actually had another one that I thought was brilliant and I can't recall it, and I'll send it if I think about it, but Two of these I want you to consider. One was, I just heard the other day, was from local radio host Lisa Wexler. She's not only a lawyer and a probate judge in Fairfield County, but for a number of years, she served on Westport's Planning and Zoning Commission. And very recently, Mrs. Wexler said, as a commissioner, I felt our most important role of all was to listen to the people. And she elaborated on that, but I thought those words alone were pretty powerful, especially when you consider the stuff you need to statutorily. We hope that you consider the important factor of listening to the people. And the second one, to consider how rapidly our society is changing, and to be able to consider the unintended consequences of what you're about to decide. I wanted you to ponder, as I'm pondering now, a quote from General Dwight D. Eisenhower, apparently a famous quote, where he said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." So I hope you'll take that into consideration. On behalf of ENNA, again, we thank you for your hard work. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, we would ask the chairman to consider keeping open comment open for a period of time for additional written comments only. Thank you so much.
Next one is Jim Carter. Jim Carter. Yes, I will be briefer. My name is Jim Carter. I live at 16 Norport Drive in East Norwalk. That's along the Canfield Creek salt marsh. I've lived there for 12 years, and for the 25 years prior to that, I lived on the other side of the marsh on Canfield Island. So I'm intimately familiar with the realities of living along the Norwalk shoreline. I appear before you tonight to speak in opposition to the proposed new regulations regarding the substantial improvement of non-FEMA compliant homes. While I kind of struggle to understand the real rationale of why we need to do this, I see why it could benefit FEMA to some degree. Although even that seems minimal, since the FEMA benefits are capped. So I'm not sure that they would really benefit, but I really don't see how the city of Norwalk benefits. And certainly don't see how the residents benefit. This seems to limit our ability to maintain and improve our homes. It puts us at a disadvantage to other communities. And I can't see how that makes us all better for this exercise. In particular, and specifically, I would urge that we maintain the market value time that's determined to the current market value, that the percentage of value allowed for improvement and repairs be maintained at 50%, and that the time frame for that budget reset be in the 3 to 5 year neighborhood. I've appeared before you numerous times before, and frankly, I've always been pretty much in lockstep with your proposals. This one, however, I would urge that we think about these specifics. I'd also add that I think the flood regulation aspects of the overall zoning proposal have kind of been overshadowed by the greater upzoning questions, and a lot of waterfront residents are really not aware of this. And so I think the comments and concerns that you've heard really are not reflective of the real realities if everyone were up to speed with what's going on. So I will close. I thank you for your time. It's an important matter for us all. I personally, we're contemplating adding a second floor dormer onto our home, low aspect change to the roof line. But these new regulations would preclude us from that opportunity. So again, I don't see how this benefits Norwalk housing stock, and that's really kind of the bigger overall purpose of this, and this one seems to fly in the face of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Butler. Sorry. Oh, next speaker. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I was here last night and sat with you guys as we listened to everything. My name is Jennifer Butler and I live at 15 Park Lane. In the not so distant past, I worked closely with the Planning and Zoning Department in my neighborhood of Harborview as we look to repair and elevate the severely damaged waterfront clubhouse we have after Superstorm Sandy. I was at your office daily for 2.5 years and had the front row seat to witness the different situations planning and zoning works with and the folks you work with on a daily basis. I witnessed the confusion of people working with the zoning code firsthand. So I thank you all so much for undertaking this Herculean task of rewriting our city zoning code. It's moving from 31 codes to 15, moving from 31 zones to 15 zones isn't an easy undertaking, but once we're all beyond this, I think that it will be much easier for the residents of our most unique city. That said, we're at the getting there part of this process, and that's why we're all here today. So I'm here to specifically address 2 situations. One is the substantial improvement math allowed on the non-compliant homes, and the second is the submitted Manresa overlay plan by Argent Ventures. I'll try and keep my ideas really succinct, and I'll try and get through this real quick. Firstly, the substantial improvement allowed on homes. Rather than get into the details of the math as it pertains specifically to my home and the many homes around me, I think Caroline Ward and Mary Beth Sullivan outlined the math quite well last night. I'd like to point out a possible unintended consequence of what happens when there is a very narrow window of basic improvements allowed on non-compliant homes. I think it's safe to say that no one desires to live in an unsafe home, and that zoning code exists essentially to make homes in our city safer, like lifting a home in a flood zone keeps the home standing. If the window for allowed monetary improvement is too narrow, this may create a situation where good-intentioned homeowners of finite means, in an effort to protect their largest investment, might take the path of an I can do it myself and I can do it under the radar, rather than going the appropriate route of getting the permit and having building inspections come to their house and certify that safety codes are met. Hold on. Sorry. If they do these repairs, these small repairs over time and slowly over time, we may come to a situation where several homes in our community are no longer safe. We're actually people who've sort of gone around. I think Diane Cece also spoke to this. You know, we just might be creating a situation where people do stuff secretly, and I don't think any of us want any of that to happen. Secondly, I'd like to address is the submitted Manresa overlay plan. I am a founding member of the Manresa Neighborhood Coalition. I'm speaking on behalf of myself today, not for them. I know that they submitted a plan for you guys to consider. I was a part of a meeting that they invited us to recently, and I'm very excited that we have new neighbors. They seem very exciting, very lovely, and we're looking forward to being good neighbors. That said, I do think that the overlay plan they submitted is a little vast for this time, and just because you guys might be able to sneak a little a large thing through this bottleneck. We're all trying to get the whole city zoning codes done at one time. Building on that property can't really even begin until the DOT releases the property or their easement is up on the property. So, and that's in like 2032. So we do have some time for all of us to sit back, take a breather, and really look at that overlay plan. That said, it is an exciting idea, and I like that we're gonna have some new neighbors. So I hope that you'll consider that. And thank you again for allowing these public hearings to happen.
Thank you.
Again, before I go back to the next speaker, anybody attending virtually, *9 by phone, or raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. Next speaker is Tom Devine.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here for the second night in a row and all the work that you've done for the city of Norwalk. But my name is Tom Devine. I live at 5 Sasker Road, Norwalk. I'm here tonight to discuss my family's business in Norwalk. It's a 105-year-old company that's located on 38 Commerce Street, Norwalk, the west side of the Norwalk River. We bring in product via the Norwalk River for the manufacturing of concrete and can be used for bringing in heating oil to our terminal that's on the same property as the concrete plant. From that property, we produce the concrete, we bring in other products, and we deliver it to the city of Norwalk and the surrounding towns, and concrete, Fairfield County, and Westchester, New York County. And it seems as though that we're kind of being everything that's in the zoning, the future zoning plan is under question as to whether or not we want to continue doing the work that we're doing here in Norwalk. We're in the propane industry as well as the heating oil industry. We're growing in that industry. In the future, we won't, if the zoning and continues the way it's going to go, we won't be able to put propane tanks in. We won't be able to keep the vibrant company going in growth in terms of if we want to be more efficient in being competitive in the concrete industry. It seems like there is everything we might want to do in the future, we're going to have to get a permit for to continue what we're doing. It's a very competitive industry that we're in both the energy as well as the building supply industry. We utilize the river tremendously. Every single day we're getting product in by either truck or river. The Devine Brothers, if we decide to end our business in Norwalk and our neighbors, O&G, the Norwalk River would eventually silt up in the northern very end of the Norwalk River. We're at the very end of the Norwalk River. The Army Corps of Engineers comes in. It's very difficult to get them to come in, but they do, and they dredge the river. If we are not there, then that's going to eventually stop, and all the building that's going on around the river won't have Riverview property. It's going to be a marsh because the Army Corps of Engineers won't come in and dredge. We have permits to dredge in front of our bulkhead. O&G has permits to dredge in front of their bulkhead, but the whole river needs to be dredged by the Army Corps of Engineers every 30 or so years. And if companies like us that are using it for commercial use aren't around, then they're not going to do it. And it's very difficult to be in competitive industries when there's an overreach with planning and zoning to constantly oversee what we're doing. And we're not doing it wrong, but being competitive and trying to improve our efficiencies if we're slowed up by having to deal with permits all the time. And I agree with it. I mean, I love Norwalk. I've been in Norwalk for my whole life. And I agree with the fact that we have to have some oversight, but we just see it as hampering us in growth. And that's all I have to say tonight. I've submitted a letter. You can all read it. You guys, I've done a lot of volunteer work in Norwalk, and I definitely appreciate the work you guys are doing, but just try to understand and sympathize with a lot of the people here that own properties along the water and see issues that are going on with their homes that have to be addressed, but they can't address it because they have to raise their home first. It's a big deal. It costs a lot of money. And what they see as priorities is not necessarily what is the priority. A leaking roof that is ruining a home makes no, it's if you're creating mold issues, you're creating all issues, water issues that basically ruin a home. If you can't fix that, but you have to raise it first, you can't afford to fix the roof, then why bother raising it? I mean, if we can't afford to be in business in Norwalk, then we're out. And it's under consideration, but enough is enough. There's only so much that you can deal with. And if companies like, us aren't around to say, hey, to the Army Corps of Engineers, we need to dredge this river, it's not going to get dredged, guys. It just doesn't happen. There's two commercial, besides the Ronas, there's two commercial companies on the city of Norwalk these days, and it's getting harder and harder to do business around here. And it's too bad, but it's something you really need to consider when you change the planning and zoning regulations. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Roberta DiBiseglia.
Good evening. I'm Roberta DiBiseglia, 2 Osborne Avenue, Norwalk. I am a homeowner and a business owner in the city of Norwalk. I've stated many times for the record, as well as by mail written to the commission, that I'm strongly opposed to the overdensity that planning and zoning is proposing. Right now, I'm going to be extremely brief. I do want to say that I am really disturbed about your proposal to upzone Cottage Street. If you've been on the ground there, you know that that area is already incredibly congested. It's very difficult to maneuver vehicles through that street, and I just don't understand why that's happening at all, especially because it's right on top of the development that's going to happen on Cemetery Street, which is going to change the tenor of the neighborhood in a big way. I'm also very concerned about the zoning change on Seaview Avenue to CD3, which will allow either P or PL to have hotels there, amphitheaters, health clubs, theaters, restaurants. The stretch on Seaview Avenue right now from the Pastime Club up to, which is at 59 Seaview Avenue, up to Fisherman's World at 2 Fort Point Street near Liberty Square, is fairly quiet and fully residential. There's nothing commercial there at all. It's directly opposite Veterans Memorial Park. The above listed uses that I just mentioned would significantly change the character of this neighborhood, which borders on CD2. It would also exacerbate the existing parking and traffic issues, which are already of great concern to many of us. And once again, I would be remiss if I didn't ask what is going on with residential parking passes. I'd love an update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane Lauricella.
Don't worry, I'm not going to read these books to you. It's more of show and tell at the end. I've read some. Good evening. For the record, my name is Diane Lauricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. I first wanted to thank this commission and the staff and the city of Norwalk for allowing us to take on this venture. I also want to thank the public. Many of us brave enough to come here today. I wanted to show up because you showed up. I also want to thank the city for allowing a hybrid method of handling these situations to allow people that just can't get here, and also some of your commissioners. I think it's a good way to go in today's society. I believe in the good intent of this effort. And I thank you for having it. Some of the outcome, though, still needs some work. Not ready for prime time, as some have said. I first wanted to say that what I feel we need to work a lot more on, and there are examples in your neighboring communities as well as other states, is, and I'm just going to briefly make a brief list and then a little more information. The affordable housing zoning regs need to be amended again. We need to revisit, and I'll explain some sources for you to help you do that quickly. The exclusionary zoning that is still here in Norwalk, I have brought to your attention, I held up the book by Richard Rothstein called The Color of Law. He and his daughter, Leah Rothstein, just finished a book called Just Action, How to Challenge Segregation Enacted Under the Color of Law. I highly recommend you all read this book. It talks about how, even in the city of Norwalk, in all the 40 years I've lived here, I could say that we do have some exclusionary zoning, and the rush to when this the single family to two family, what people are calling upzoning, which is literally a downzoning, the way it was presented, again, with good intention perhaps by the staff and this commission, caused a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about your good intent to try to put together additional housing opportunities, especially for the missing middle. I ask that you, as I said during other public meetings, you take a look and more strategically look at areas where you can have single-family homes turned into two-family homes. I don't know if the handful that remain now are the right areas or not. I think that, and I understand it, the pushback was tremendous all summer. And the thing is, I think you do need to revisit this because your intent was good. The broad brushing was a huge mistake. Should never have happened. I think we need to go back and revisit this. I do also think one way you must, and one way to make sure we add some two-family zones is to make sure it's owner occupied. That will solve the problem. And it will keep some of the rightful fears that we've heard about Golden Hill and the missing landlords. Wouldn't happen as much. We still have some issues. I also think reducing parking minimums, definitely got to look at that. I know there were a lot of people, especially folks from Sustainable Streets, but not in comparison. And I'm a friend of Tanner Thompson. I was shocked when he claimed that reducing parking spaces was more environmentally, ecologically beneficial than renewable energy and solar and green roofs. That is absolutely incorrect. I will be speaking with him about this. Please do not listen. He's not coming from fact. And I do think, I don't want any of you who care about sustainability to think that that is a truthdom. It is not. And I'll be going into it. I want us to try to use science for some of this related to overlay zones. And I'll talk about that in a moment relating to drinking water and radon protection. And then lastly, I just want to make sure that you know your sustainability efforts are good. However, you just haven't gone deeply enough and far enough. You just haven't. And I've been told, well, this isn't perfect. That's the latest thing that's being trotted around. No one's expecting it to be perfect, but I consider this an opportunity for this commission and this city
who had its mayor when he was reelected say, I want Norwalk to be the greenest city. I do too. Let's go back to the drawing board about anything that relates to sustainability, energy, and water conservation. So I will go quickly over the list. On energy conservation overlay zones, you had some guest speakers. I wasn't one of them, unfortunately, but I did give you the names of some entities that could give you free advice that is professional and is used throughout New England or the country. I'll go over that list of what's missing in a moment, but you have to include other forms of renewable energy and not laser-like focus on solar on roofs. And I know that in the regulations, of which I haven't had the chance to get through all of them, you do mention other forms could be allowed, but I would like them spelled out. Geothermal ground source heat pumps. There is now geothermal networks that include several buildings, and in Massachusetts and even in Connecticut, Eversource has a pilot program going on that. Solar, the solar efforts you made are too conservative. You need to go back to the drawing board. You have to add in that all municipal buildings and municipal properties must evaluate efficiency and renewable energy opportunities, because right now they are not, even though the new schools are claiming they're going to utilize renewable energy because they won't have reimbursement and they are doing it. You still have older buildings and properties in the city that could also include solar. And there's different kinds of solar. You have, I think, been given the wrong impression that rooftop solar is the way to go in Norwalk. It is not the only way to go, although we need an across the board policy and zone and regulations that older buildings can have rooftop solar. There's a policy now by the building management that says we're just putting solar panels on our municipal buildings that are new or additions. That is wrong-headed. It's cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in energy costs. It is the wrong way to go. Newtown and many other cities and towns around the area have placed solar panels on older buildings. You need to include carport solar. I don't see that specifically in the regs to make it work, except as an afterthought. And lastly, ground mounted solar. It doesn't have to be a whole solar array that covers a landfill. You could place one or two stanchions. It doesn't have, it can fit in Norwalk as well. I think instead of just looking for larger buildings, and I think it's great, I agree with the Conservation Commission. I'm glad it seems like you've moved it to 5,000 square feet. I think there should be a medium tier for 2,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet for smaller commercial buildings and larger homes and apartment buildings. And there should be a smaller tier to aspire people that have homes and smaller buildings under 2,000 square feet. Why are we limiting it just to larger buildings? This is a moment in a climate crisis. We have to put it on the table now. Other towns are doing so. Under emergency management and energy, you may say, well, what about that? In Norwalk, there is nothing that I could find in this rewrite. I know that there are good attention paid to cycling and pedestrian pods, but we need something related to microgrid, which are zones that, for instance, in an emergency, there should be a microgrid in each of our neighborhoods, each of our zones, so that when and if we have a hurricane or the power goes down because of a storm like Sandy or all the storms we had when I think Malloy was the governor, we would still be able to keep at least some basic services like a supermarket. The sewage treatment plant could be run by a microgrid, and there's been no attention paid to this. I do think CERCA, FEMA, and UConn can help this city. I do think you should not pass these regulations unless and until there's microgrid zones included on the map and it's planned. The emergency management people did not advocate for this. I have some background in emergency management when I used to work for the state and DEP, and we need to have it. It would be easy enough to do. Micro wind is another form of that's not mentioned enough, and then wave and tidal energy. We're on the coast, for gosh sakes. That is a thing, and we could use it to fuel energy to some of our coastal buildings. And that's just a small portion. Instead of just listing all the different programs like LEED and what has been listed, Passive House, as certifiable, I want to see that we instead have across the board actual mandates on some of this, instead of just not even requesting that they get certified. I really think we should go back to the drawing board on this so that it's reasonable. And lastly, for your good intention on the use of solar on roofs, you have a huge gap. You have now said that it must be whatever is usable space. That for a developer, and I've worked with developers, I'll make sure that my rooftop has all sorts of things that would reduce the amount of roof space that solar panels would be mandated. So I wish you would go back and revisit that particular word, because it's a loophole, and I don't think you meant. I did hear the discussion about it. Under water quality and quantity, please consider river conservation zones. You do mention living shoreline and vegetative buffers, and I'm very pleased about that. I do think that the Harbor Commission, and I was on the Mayor's Water Quality Committee, I may still be, we should and do care about that, and I think it was a terrific addition, and I thank you. But I'd like to see a river conservation zone where a menu of low impact development and green infrastructure is mandated. They get a list, they have to choose some of it, but I'm especially looking at the area around Wall Street, where we have so much impervious surface that it is contaminating the upper harbor and the Norwalk River. I have mentioned before a drinking water protection zone overlay in the northeast and northwest section of the city. A lot of you have heard me say, and it is true, at least 22% of the city residents are on their own private on-site wells that are either drilled into bedrock or into sand and gravel aquifers. The reason why this is important to think about, and I did meet someone from Circa, a lawyer that said that she thought this was interesting and she would help the city put it together, is because extending public water pipes sometimes is far too expensive, but in a time of drought, those public water utilities may not have the capacity to add additional miles of pipe. So we should preserve what we have, and that should include, of course, education of those dwellers that have wells. A lot of them are transplants from New York City, where they just turn on the tap and they take it for granted. Under water quality and quantity, I again asked with the coastal area management and the request by the Harbor Management Commission to have a little more time. I just read the DEEP letter, like many of you, yesterday, and there were some wonderful discussions that need to take place, and is enough of a reason not to go forward with voting on this by the end of this month, because they suggested, and I also suggest, as a former Harbor Management Commissioner under Bill Collins in the 1980s, the first class, that you need the details, not the general grand gesture, because this is serious business, as you all know, and certain people will look for the loopholes. So you really need to take a look at it. Also with road end parks, I know that you had a study of that. I'd love to see it spelled out more in these and be an incentivize. It's a wonderful way to reduce impervious surfaces and filtering ability into our harbor and our river. Under affordable housing, I said that I wanted to suggest that you rethink this. And here are some quick suggestions. Add strategically more places where townhomes and two-family zones can be placed. I am in the missing middle, sometimes lower income, depending upon how my business is doing. There are a lot of people that cannot afford the apartment buildings that have been built in the urban core. I am not opposed to urban density straight away if it's placed in the right place and we have limits to it. I do think townhomes allow for affordability to buy, and also we must look at the ADU, accessory dwelling unit regulations. They must be owner occupied. We need to increase the square footage to 900 to 1,000 feet because currently, as your first applicant has said, it's very difficult to do it. And we really could do better on that. You have to allow front yard detached ADUs with a special permit so that it is placed properly, but to ban it is very short-sighted. And lastly, you must allow homes with wheels. I won't be looking up at the person that said this, but they know who they are on the commission. Wheeled homes are a way for these tinier homes and small homes to be built where they're less expensive. And if we're trying to increase and the fact that we want more accessory, we want more affordable housing units by constructing them off-site and wheeling them to the location where they lock the wheels, and they are usually covered with landscape, you don't have a trailer park. You have an ADU that's detached or a tiny home. Go online and check out what's available in Australia and New Zealand. They're gorgeous and they comport to affordability as well. I am a senior, a young senior, but I know seniors up in Cranberry and West Norwalk and Silvermine that would love to have a detached affordable unit that's a little bigger than 700 square feet, 750. And then they could rent they'll be on the premises and they could rent out the family home their family has grown up and out. So please reconsider this. Seniors want to stay in the towns they love, in this town. Under enforcement, I want to reiterate and thank ENNA and Ms. Cece for mentioning this. Others have mentioned it. Education is important for the regulated community. As a former regulator, I never liked slamming them with a hammer. They need to understand the regulations, as do the public. So I ask that you really go back and look at your enforcement plans. You need more than what is being proposed by the city, and I will be advocating for additional staff, because the one or two people that they've suggested when we've had very expensive outdoor events, I think we have to rethink what our priorities are. It's good to have outdoor events for our people, for the public, but we also need to spend money on enforcement people, even if they're part-time, to help on the backlog. Under industrial zones, I say preserve them. I've been saying this for decades as a former regulator especially, but because they provide a tax base. I do believe that this commission has been given the impression of the old image of smokestacks belching. I will say that any industrial zones we have with contractor yards or industries, they must look at themselves. And if they are dusty, noisy, I want the city to enforce the laws, either the health department, the police department for noise, and the health department, or the zoning enforcement. They have to be good neighbors too. And I think that we shouldn't just assume that all industrial uses are bad. I did sit in on the Chamber of Commerce Industrial Review, and we all agreed that we need to preserve industrial zones for jobs and being a clean industrial zone. Under landscaping throughout your regulations. I'm sorry. There has to be something to stop the lawn obsession of New England and Connecticut. And I wish you would consider giving points, more points in the single family areas, as well as the B zones, et cetera, to give them credit for reducing the amount of lawn, because that will help with creating water quality, cooling the water, the runoff. It will cost them less money, less noise with leaf blowers, and you'll also allow for native plants. And then I'm almost done. Here's what's missing in the sustainability and the help you all need to talk to the people that run the following organizations. I have not heard that you have talked with them. Even if the staff made a phone call, you need to hear from these people face to face. They have something to offer. The Connecticut Green Bank was supposed to send me, they have a list of zoning regs, and unfortunately they have not done so yet. So that is one reason why I'd like you to keep the record open, at least for written material, because the Connecticut Green Bank is helping create a greener city, a greener state, and they are terrific. They have community solutions, electric storage solutions, they have CPACE, home energy assessment. They have zoning regulation models that you should have been told about and you need in order to complete your sustainability efforts here. There's the Northeast Energy Partnership, or NEAP. I know that because I was on virtual, it was misunderstood that I said DEEP. No, I said NEEP. You need to hear from the Northeast Energy Partnership. It is a free New England group that will help you rewrite some of your and write some of your sustainability intent. Remember, your intent is good, the implementation, not so much. The NRCS, and I know this is a gobbledygook of the ABCs of government at times, the Federal Natural Resource Conservation Service. They have a lot to do with helping with soil restoration, forest management. They were consulted with when I and others helped with putting together the Newark River Watershed Initiative plan. Please talk with them before you finish these regulations. NRCS, they have a lot of money. The IRA, they have money. Let's use it. RMI stands for Rocky Mountain Institute. It is a not-for-profit out west, but it is excellent as far as looking at energy in cities and towns. How can we adapt and create renewable energy opportunities? I didn't hear that they were included. Building with wood. It is a new thing happening in the construction industry. I don't remember reading, and again, I didn't read every word, but building with wood may be something that you need to include and encourage for certain levels of increased levels. The amenity points that ENNA made, I want to reiterate, many that they mentioned, I agree should be standard or mandated, not given amenity points to certain kinds of developments. However, I do think incentivizing for some of the other sustainability is important, but give them a menu of mandated. They have to choose, not that they may, but they must. Give them a menu and make it a thing across the board. The public engagement and participation, I very much agree with what Ms. Ceci said, and I've been a long time good governance advocate, and I want to make sure that we are going to give the public, who are the taxpayers, the ability in advance to make sure that they can give you their opinions, both professional and altruistically. Lastly, Ms. Keefe brought up last night an issue about encouraging more restaurants and food stores around the Norwalk Green. I think that's an excellent idea. Let's do it. Why not? Just as you have in Article 5, your pedestrian sheds, let's have solar sheds, geothermal sheds. Let's have drinking water protection sheds. I like that term. I do think that
Zoning is meant to change behavior and incentivize behavior. I aspire also, like our mayor, to be the greenest city. But please consider postponing the end of the public input. Postpone your decision until early 2024. Let's do this well. Nothing is perfect. If you are getting pressure to try to finish this by the end of this year, please let the public know who is pressuring you. We will clap back at them. You, Mr. Kleppen, earlier this year said, and I was very pleased, he said, and you all agreed, that we have a lot to do here. If it lasts until 2024, so be it. We'd want to do it as well as we can. And I'm saying none of us have had enough time to read through this for you to spend all the time you have, and I know you have, for weeks, to all of a sudden in December, after Thanksgiving, these are the busiest times for people in small business people like me, big business people, families, and I know all of you as well are busy during this time. I think you should just make a decision sooner rather than later that you're going to postpone your decision and postpone the public hearing closing until early 2024, because I believe some of you really would like to, and I do think you should speak up when the time comes. In all due respect, we're all human. We're trying to help each other here. We need more time. This is very dense. It's very complicated. We want to help you do the great job I know you aspire to. Lastly, here is 3 things. The Source Protection Handbook by the Trust for Public Land will help you get to that river conservation and drinking water zone. I will get this, if you keep the record open past tonight, I will make sure that the staff gets this. There is the Norwalk River Watershed Action Plan. It's been updated. I was very involved with that as former founding president of the Norwalk River Watershed Association. And lastly, by Donald Watson and Michelle Adams. They are in Connecticut, Design for Flooding, Architecture, Landscape, and Urban Design for Resilience to Climate Change. And I'm sorry this has taken a while, Mr. Chairman, but this is a very important thing for the city. It's a very large document for me to read, and I hope that at least some of what I said will help you in your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anthony Lehman.
Steve, can I ask how many more speakers are listed?
We have one here and then one online. So,
Okay, so, well, I don't think we'll take a break. We'll discuss briefly.
and Mr. Lima, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Please, okay, great. Sounds good. All right, good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'll try to keep this short. My name is Anthony Lima, and I live in the Golden Hill neighborhood currently, but I've lived in Flax Hill and at the Clock Tower in the past. I picked this neighborhood primarily because of its proximity to South Norwalk, although I do like, I do like Wall Street a lot too. The reason why is that I like walking places and riding my bike, and it's a shame that all the car traffic here makes both of those things so dangerous. And now I won't drone on about the traffic since I'm sure you've heard it a million times already, and I object to any dog whistle remarks like Norwalk is full. I think there's still room to grow, provided we do it in an equitable manner. I think the new zoning regs are a great opportunity to enable Norwalk to grow into the walkable, bikeable, sustainable city that I would like to see. So I'm making comments tonight because while I think it's a good start, I think the parking regulations as written are holding us back. All of my favorite places in the city were built before the parking minimums were implemented. There's a reason why everyone likes Washington Ave, and there's a reason why it feels so welcoming and lively, and why it generates so much business and culture, you know, for Norwalk. That Halloween festival was fantastic. And it's not because of all the parking. I think we need to acknowledge the inverse relationship between car development and human-centered development. The easier a city is to drive through to find parking, the worse it is to live in. You know, and I've always avoided living on Connecticut Ave because I didn't want to live in a Walmart parking lot or on a highway exit for that matter. I want to live in a healthy neighborhood, you know, where I'm not afraid for my kids to bike around or I'm not choking on car exhaust. The problem with parking minimums as written is that you can't build places like Washington Ave anymore, at least not without tearing down the next block over for the parking. It also bears mentioning that the data used to set these requirements in the past was almost non-existent. You know, they were more or less based off of a gut feeling. So to me, it seems ludicrous that we would keep them in place and prevent Norwalk from building more of our favorite places. I'm in favor of getting rid of the parking minimums altogether, or at the very least, reducing them around train stations or other key areas where I would like to see people taking more trips without cars and preferably walking or biking. One final comment that I'll make is that I also chose to live here because of the proximity of small corner stores. That was one of the most important criteria for me. I love the ability to walk across the street and pick up a couple groceries. So with that in mind, I'd love to see more zones allow for mixed use development where you can have storefronts on the ground floor and housing on top. Thank you all for listening to my comments tonight, and good luck.
Thank you.
Did you sign up? I'm sorry, I don't have you. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm being lazy and not getting the sheet, so come on up.
Hi, my name is Emily Hayden and I live at 7 Cottage Street. I've owned that home for 23 years. It's a single family home. I did come in a little bit late, so I'm sorry if I repeat what other people have said. But, you know, I'm here to oppose the zoning change from C to CD4, obviously. And I just don't understand this proposal at all. I don't understand the reasoning behind it, who benefits from this, the developers, landlords, like who is benefiting from this zoning change on Cottage Street? What is their hardship, right, that would prompt this change in zoning? Where will all these people park, right? I'm not sure the last time you guys have driven down Cottage Street, but there's no parking at all for the current people that live there. At least 4 houses that I counted, and there might be more, don't have a driveway, right? So they only have on-street parking. These are current houses on Cottage Street. The condo residents, Cottage Commons, they all park on the street, right? They have a parking garage under their building, but they all park on the street. So right now, there's just, it's like completely overcrowded. There's a house that faces Osborne Avenue that cut through the curb on Cottage, cut through the sidewalk and created their own driveway in their backyard. And no one did anything about it. So that's 2 or 3 parking spaces that got destroyed there. There's just, again, it doesn't exist. So I'm not sure where these 5 or 6 and all these multifamily homes are gonna be able to park. My driveway, the way it is, people just block it all the time because it's like the end parking spot. So they just like, you know, figure, oh, they can, you know, block my driveway by 2 or 3 feet, and that's not a big deal. So it's just, it's not existent. Cottage Street is used as a cut through, right, from Sono over to Strawberry Hill, right? The traffic is crazy. It's honestly crazy. And because all there's on-street parking, because the current residents we have, you know, 2-way traffic is almost impossible to pass through. Fire trucks, ambulances, all the Amazon trucks we have now, they can't get through. And it's, you know, it's a little bit hazardous. So, you know, for me, it's a little bit of a safety issue. You know, I've lived there for 23 years. I own a home there. Already that neighborhood is going to be impacted by the monstrosity it's getting built where Wells Fargo is. You know, my house was built in 1892, right? As were many of the other houses on that street. They might be a little bit run down, okay, but they're still charming. And, you know, to tear them all down would just be a shame. So, you know, I strongly urge you to deny this change in zoning.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think everybody here, I don't know if you spoke, man. Anybody online, you can use the raise your hand function. This will be your, I believe, your last opportunity to address the commission on the application in front of them. So if you want to do so, now is the time. Not seeing
That's
anyone.
it?
I think that's it.
All right, if that's it, we're going to close the public hearing. We have meeting scheduled December 13th at 6 o'clock. Is that going to be in this room or up in the council chambers?
Council chambers.
Okay, that'll be in the council chambers. And if we require further discussion beyond that among ourselves, we'll be meeting on December 14th at 6 o'clock, also in the council chambers. Those are not public hearings. that will be the members of the commission speaking among themselves and to the staff. But the public is more than welcome to attend.
Can we talk about extending the input period? Are we going to discuss that right now?
No, the hearing has been closed.
Can we extend it to, well, you just said that, but we didn't actually vote on that. Can we, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound contradictory.
I understand.
I think we ought to extend it a period of time, and for the other commissioners, you want to discuss that till Friday, perhaps, or later? For public comment?
At this point, people
Anybody have an opinion about that?
have had months on this.
People want to mail in stuff, and we got that new, stuff. And so I'm sorry, something that's just right, you know, I'm the man document that's going in. I'm okay with it. I mean, it's just an email coming in, just, they would just have to forward to us. If we would have to review it by the 12th.
I see virtually no value to.
Well, it was a
extending,
request.
But right, I understand that.
Yeah,
But I don't know what 2 days is going to accomplish either for the public or for us. I'm sorry, Anna?
I'm not convinced that we should extend the public comment. I think we spoke a few weeks ago and decided that it would end at the end of tonight's hearing, but I am concerned about including Manresa and the substantial improvement within this rewrite. I would like to propose that those things be handled separately.
Well, that's entirely up to us, and we can make that decision next
Those
week.
came in late and the public hasn't had a chance to fully digest.
That's not the substantial improvement. I think, well, I was gonna say this later on, but I think there's been a big misunderstanding that we already have flood zone regulations with substantial improvement as part of them. And the new regulation is actually less restrictive than what is on the books now in most instances. There are probably some properties that may not specifically apply to, but it's not a new regulation. It's been on the books for a long time.
That was actually, I want to bring something up because when we had that discussion, I think it was October 25th. Because somebody said they were actually watching the meeting in one of the letters, the emails that we got. I was under the impression that we were discussing a lessening of a burden for homeowners. And it seemed that way and I'm not saying that there was any motive to like change our minds or let's say mislead us, because I don't certainly there wasn't a motive to do that. But I do think that the way it was presented to us by the conservation staff that evening was that it was actually a big improvement over the current regulations. But what we're hearing from people is heart-wrenching. And I think the letters and the testimony to that effect has put a huge question in my mind of why, because I was supporting that actually on October 25th. And now I feel like I don't think I understood the ramifications, but I also can tell from reading the letters that there's confusion on some residents' part as to what the current regulations are, because they're referring to things that we didn't even discuss. For instance, the 1999 fair market value that was established for someone, and they couldn't put a porch on it. That was from a letter from an architect. Anyway, there's lots of reasons for me to support Anna's request to put that aside, take that out of the regulations, and as well as the Manresa Island overlay, which is serious, needs serious discussion. And if we separate those out, then I think if we extend a public comment period till Friday, I'd be happy to move forward with this on the time frame that we're discussing.
I don't think that it's necessary to discuss this further here. Both of those items can be discussed next week at our meeting, and we can decide what to do with them. We can decide if we want to set that overlay aside. We can decide if we want to set aside the new regulation regarding flooding or to adopt some other alternative. But that belongs in next week's discussion, doesn't belong at this meeting.
Well, I think it would be unfair, though, to the public to have them question whether or not they can send in.
Well, that's a
Are we
separate,
gonna-
a separate,
are we gonna
keeping,
shut down?
keeping the opportunity for comment open until Friday is a separate issue. And that I think it's all right to discuss here now.
Well, I'll just go on the record right now, along with Anna, to support the removal of the substantial improvement, as well as the,
This is a public hearing.
The
It's
man-
not, we do
Yes.
not, we do not have the authority to take action this evening.
right, I understand that part too. So there's a bureaucratic reason.
I'm not making an official motion. I raised that in the context of the question of keeping comment.
And that's fine.
And that's where my spirit is in this as well, is.
Regarding whether
I
we
think the
hold
public needs
open,
clarity.
hold open comments until Friday.
Emails coming on Friday, they'll come.
I don't have any objection to
Yeah,
that.
as long as
Does
it's not-
anyone else have any objection to it?
As long as it's not bigger than projects.
Can we place a,
Consider-
can we place a time on that? Because I mean,
What's the end of your workday, Steve? Well, no.
Friday was gonna be early, for me at least.
Should we say noon on Friday?
Or noon.
Earlier the better.
Noon on
But
Friday,
that's
so you guys have
not
time to update?
All right, well, do we as a commission really see a big difference in the outreach between here today and Friday? Do we see a big difference?
I would like to give the public a little bit more time to refine on some of these issues, because maybe as they've heard speakers over the last 2 nights, it might have sparked something in their thought process, and I think it would be, important for us to hear what they have to say. Give them a couple days to write it up and send it in. It's making more work for us, but that's okay. I feel we should read what they have to say.
I think whatever comes in by 10 o'clock Friday morning
You just
would
say,
be a cutoff point, because we all have to read it. So
yeah, that's what I said. It's more work for us, but I don't.
Okay,
mind that.
can we agree on that?
Can I just say one, maybe just one more thing? While I think I think we're perfectly reasonable to cut it off tonight, but if we're gonna keep it open, I think we should keep it open through Monday or Tuesday. I think cutting it off at 10 a.m. Friday is too short.
We can't do that because we have to respond. Staff's gonna have to respond. So you're gonna be responding up until the time of our meeting next
Could it be Monday morning?
I think that's extremely unfair.
Really?
Like you want
Yeah.
to.
Put that out there. Okay. You don't read in the middle of the night?
I read better well.
Well, and I would also say the fact that some of the largest, industrial owners in the city have come forward in the last couple, 2 nights, that certainly there may be others that I'd want to hear from. So Friday midday to me seems at least just a very small gesture of respect to people that might want to have put something on the record for another, 36 hours perhaps.
I'd be hungry.
Is there any
I'll make
objection?
a motion that gets cut off 10 o'clock Friday.
Okay, there a second to the motion? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, let's do it with a show of hands. Yeah, Galen. Galen,
Yeah, yes.
are you in favor? Oh, JJ.
Now, the current thing is, what I am being asked to vote on is allowing public input via email or written input until Friday at noon, right?
Friday at 10.
Friday at 10 in the morning, okay. If that's it, I am in favor of it and vote yes.
Okay, seems unanimous.
I tried better, but that's, all right, I'll support that.
Okay. let's,
But the
Quick-
public hearing is otherwise closed, right? With this exception for written comment.
That's correct.
And
And there,
That's why we attend.
All right, let's,
and there's precedent for that. We do that quite often, for applications, and this is important.
comments of the director, Steve?
No, only other thing I'll say, not to belittle things, even, assuming you take action on the whole application next week, this is not the end of the conversation with this, that we have an affordable housing plan going on, doing continual work with Circa, the city's doing a whole climate action plan. So these things are going to evolve over the next few years. So even if there's something in the regulations, and I'm 100% certain there's going to be some concepts in there that don't work or didn't work as intended, we have to go back and adjust it. Zoning is not a perfect science. It's a lot of gray. Things will get fixed and adjusted over time. I fully anticipate that maybe 6 months into the process, we'll have another meeting, maybe perhaps a public hearing where folks can provide input and feedback on what they've seen to date, what works, what doesn't work. And we can do that at 12 months. We can do that at 18 months. It's not the end of the story, but we have to move the ball at some point in time.
Yes,
Also-
exactly.
Also, residents have reserve the right to propose an amendment to the zoning code and at any point.
Right.
Throughout the year.
All right, comments from commissioners?
All right, good. Thank you for that. I'll
Go
get my
ahead.
last word in. I will definitely adamantly oppose including Manresa Island in this phase of the zoning regulation.
Any other comments from commissioners? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, we have motion to adjourn. We have a second. All in favor? Show of hands. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming this evening. And again, thank you to the commission for your patience.